Good afternoon, everyone. Please,
Good
am I
afternoon.
okay? Yes, I'm audible. My name is Mujola Oluwapelumi, as I've been introduced, and today I've been asked to talk about how we can build. Thank you, Mr. Folari, and thank you to the hosts and to Mr. Folari. Thank you so much. So I'll go straight into what I want to speak about, which is how to build a value-driven um, IP law career in Nigeria. And by way of introduction, I'd like to say that IP, of course, we all know that IP is intellectual property and it refers to creations of the mind. And then IP law protects these creations, the innovations of our minds, our inventions, it protects them in order to allow those who create them to make profit and in order to help them control how others profit from their creation. So those are the basic functions of the IP law. And what's the law if lawyers cannot apply them? Lawyers are there to apply this law, to give them enforcement, to give substance to them, to quicken them to action. And how can we do this as young lawyers? I think that we can categorize IP, intellectual property, into two broad categories. We can have those ones which relate to the ideas and the side that relates to the expression of those ideas. So I've categorized them into broadly, generally, they are categorized into industrial designs and copyrights. Under industrial designs, we have patents, industrial designs themselves, trademarks, service marks, geographical indications, and all of that. And of course, copyright, we all know what copyright the scope of copyrights has to do with lyrics, drawings, books, films, artworks, and all of that. So, and of course, copyright also protects the rights of broadcasters, performers, and producers. So that's when we're going to be talking about related rights. So these two broad categories for lawyers, there are opportunities in all of these areas. I'd like to say that IP law is quite vast. It is quite vast and it's developing. That's how vast it is. So no one can say that maybe it's saturated like some areas of law or that they cannot get a chunk of the meat. If anyone is keen enough, they would get their own chunk of the IP law market. I often when talking about IP, I often try to compare, two artists in Nigeria and what they did because they knew their rights. Because the role of a lawyer is to help um, the clients know their rights and apply the rights. I often look at the story of Salawa Abeni. I don't know how many of us know Salawa Abeni. She's they call her the Queen of Waka. She's a musician, a veteran in the class of probably Ebenezer Obey, Kolinti Ayala and all of that. So, often when they interview her, she often talks about how, when she was coming up, she had an album that was quite successful at a very young age. I think that the album is reputed to have sold 1 million copies. She was probably 18 or 22 or thereabouts at that time. But she would tell you that she only got fame from that album. She didn't make any money. And that's because a certain production company produced her, released their album, sold it. They made profits off her. And she who had, recorded and written the songs did not get much profit. As at today, if you ask Salawa, okay, now that you know that you're supposed to even get profits from this um proceeds of your album, what have you done about it? She will tell you that she's letting sleeping dogs lie. So which means that in a way we can say that she has lost out forever. And that's because she did not know her intellectual property rights and could not apply them. And now that she knows them, she's not even willing to apply them. Probably because of society we find ourselves. So I think that it's the role of lawyers to help creatives know these rights and apply them in time. You know how they say that equity aids the vigilance. And the other person I like to talk about is Onyeka Onwenu. She's also a musician. We all know her. She had this conflict with Iroko music at some point. they had streamed they had an agreement for them to stream a song for a period of time, and then when the period elapsed, she found out that they kept on streaming the song, which means that people kept downloading the song off Iroko's platform, and Iroko kept making money off Onyeka beyond the time they specified in their contracts. So she took them to court because she knew her rights. She had lawyers like you and I, and they enforced her rights and got a judgment against Iroko Music. So those two, put them side by side when you're thinking about IP law and what a lawyer can do. So in relation to how to get value out of IP, I think that we can look at it from the transactional point and the litigation point. I know that not many lawyers, especially in the big cities, not many of them want to be engaged in litigation. So even if you don't want to do litigation, there's opportunity for you in the transactional aspect. And I'm just going to be going into the two in a short while. For the transactional aspect, I've listed out a couple of opportunities that you can explore as a lawyer. I have here IP consultancy. I love that, and I think that's what I do basically. You don't you pro- I haven't gone to court to defend anyone because their IP was infringed upon and anything. So if you don't want to do litigation, IP consultancy is a very beautiful area that you can go into. What does it entail? Of course, you know the rights, you know how it should be applied, you know when someone's rights has been infringed upon, you know how someone should protect their own rights. So clients come to you as a lawyer and you tell them these things. It's just like a normal consultancy. If you were a law firm, you give out legal opinion, but in this wise, it will be streamlined to IP. So before I go on, let me just say that you cannot really be an IP lawyer in isolation. So a lawyer, I always say that a lawyer is a wholesome fellow. So if you want to be a lawyer, an IP lawyer, it doesn't mean that you wake up one day and you say that, oh, I'm an IP lawyer, and so you don't practice all other aspects of law. You don't know anything about all other aspects of law. Of course, we all know a little thing about every other aspect of law, and that is why we are lawyers. But if you want to practice IP, you have to continue to update your knowledge on other aspects of the law. Only that IP will take precedence ahead of others. For instance, if you were to start an IP consultancy, that people will come to you, a creative would come to you who knows practically nothing about their rights and how to secure it in the IP sphere. You would need to understand, for instance, if it's a musician, you need to understand some things about the entertainment industry. So in that wise, you're not just an IP lawyer, you're an entertainment lawyer. So IP is not in isolation. If, for instance, we want to talk about IP securitization, which I'm going to be talking about much later, you cannot wake up and say you're an IP lawyer if you don't know anything about securitization. That means that you have to know something about commercial law. So you have to understand securitization itself before you now branch into IP securitization. So I'll go on. So IP consultancy is something that you might want to look at if you're looking at building a practice in IP as a lawyer. Another thing you can look at is IP contract structuring and negotiation. I think that this is the most problematic area for most creatives, especially in Nigeria. You wake up every day and there's news about, oh, this artist is calling out his music label that they shut them out or they cut them off from a deal. And much recently, the popular song Jerusalem that we all sing, you know that song. It's even my ringtone as of the moment. So there's been an ongoing fight between Nomsembo and Master KG about how the proceeds from Jerusalem was shared. One person is claiming that the other person cut them off when the money came and the fame came and all of that. But if they had a proper IP lawyer who helps them to structure a proper contract, split sheets and all of that, how they would share their royalties and everything, I don't think that they would have this problem. And even if at any point this problem arises, all they need to do is go back to the drawing board and renegotiate. There's always room for renegotiation in contract structuring. So that's an area you can look at if you intend to build a practice. You can leave me comments in the chat box just to let me know that I'm not speaking to myself, please. So IP contract structuring and negotiation is one aspect. We all remember the story of Cynthia Morgan and how she claimed that her manager at the time and the record label cheated her, how they brought out her contract, how every one of us condemned one part of the contract or praised one other part of the contract. And I think that what I learned from that episode is that if Cynthia had gone to see a lawyer, because she was claiming much later on that she was, I think she claimed that she was coerced into signing or something like that, or she did not understand what she was signing at the time. If she took the contract to a lawyer, even if she did not have a lawyer on retainership, and the lawyer interpreted the contract to her before she signed it, she would have understood the implications, not just for the now, but for the future. Because thank you, Ruth Ojum, thank you for that comment. What I've realized is that most creatives, at the point of signing to a record label or something, I keep referring to music because it's the odd thing in Nigeria. Copyright is hotter than other aspects, in my own view. You may have a different opinion. So I think that at the point of being signed onto a record label or something, most of them do not really have a foresight as to how much value their music or their art or craft, is worth. So they just run off with the highest bidder at that point. And then much later, when they find out that, oh, there's so much more, or there's so much value and everything, they begin to look at what they signed earlier and they begin to think, why did I sign this? So it's important. They need lawyers. And that's why, the field is vast. There's always an opportunity for a lawyer. So you could build your practice around that, helping, creatives, whether they are new or old, helping them to structure profitable contracts, contracts that will put money in their pockets, that will put money in your own pockets too, that will not hurt anybody now and in the future. Because as a lawyer, your role is to have foresight, the foresight that they do not have. Maybe they've just come out of school, they're offering them 20 million naira, which they've never seen in their generation. You have to point them to the fact that, thank you, Joy. You have to point them to the fact that 20 million naira is not your worth, and all of that. So that's an area. Another aspect that we might want to look at as young lawyers is ADR. I think ADR is very important. It's very important. More than ever at this point in my career, I'm beginning to realize that, there are so many things that we could have used ADR to set in Nigeria, which would have reduced, the court's dockets and, moved justice forward and more accessible to the common man. So I think that ADR in IP is very important. So for instance, if you're already ADR inclined, you might want to niche into IP just like that. It works. So you already have a basis, a foundation in ADR, you just link into IP. It's very important. Every day, ADR is very crucial to IP. I remember that if you watch this movie, Your Excellency or something of the sort, there was a time when the politician was using Alex Ekubo's song for his rallies without licensing. And then Alex had to contact his lawyer and they had a meeting. They would have gone to court suing. Probably they would have been there for years, trying to get Alex some money for his song that was improperly used. But then they went to ADR and, Alex was paid off and the song was used. They continued to use the song, and then Alex even became the politician's official musician. So that's what ADR can do. ADR can reduce your client's wait time to access justice regarding their IP. So you might want to look at ADR in IP. That's one other thing. And if you're this is not just for copyright, it's also for music, it's also for other aspects of copyright. For instance, if you're an in-house counsel with a company like an advertising company, for instance, or your client is pitching to an advertising company. I think I saw one. There's a dispute online too, most recently, about a creative that did an advert for a company, and then they went on. They were still in the talking stage. He had not been paid. They had said that they weren't using the advert in that format, that he should edit it. Meanwhile, they went behind his back and they used the advert for their ad purposes, and it made them money because they were reporting their earnings online and on in verifiable records. So he was claiming that they had profited off his creative work without due remuneration, even while they had not given him go ahead to use the IP. And okay, I'll attend to the questions. They had not given him go ahead, and he had not gone ahead to use it as they had earlier agreed. So that's another aspect that you can look at. So in all aspects of life, there are clients waiting for lawyers to point them in the right direction regarding the usage of their IP and enforcing their rights. And I think that another area is registration of licenses. For trademarks, you need to register them. For copyright, you don't need to register them. Once they are created, because that's the expressed form, once they are created, they are already covered and protected by the copyright law. But for some other aspects of IP, for patents, for trademarks, for service marks, you have to register them. So you could be that lawyer, just like you're registering. Oh, thank you. I have 5 more minutes. Just like you're registering um companies, you could also register trademarks and all of that. You could conduct searches too for people who are trying to register new trademarks, register new patents and all of that, and they are trying to be sure that someone has not done something like that or registered something like that ahead of them. So you could help them conduct searches and register. And of course, you could be an in-house lawyer, to companies, to advertising companies, to music houses, and all these big music houses. They have in-house lawyers. Those are the ones that draft their own contracts. So the creative also will have a lawyer. So there's an opportunity on both sides, whether you are on the side of the company, of the record label, or on the side of the artist for the entertainment industry, for instance. So, they draft those contracts for them. They help them understand how to use. If, for example, a movie production company is going to use an artist's music on their film, or if they are going to use an artist's adapt an artist's a writer's book into a movie and all of that. Lawyers are involved in all these things. They help them do things properly and help them avoid infringing on the rights of creatives. And of course, on the other side, creatives also need lawyers to help them, fight infringement where it's coming up. So that's why those are opportunities, for lawyers in IP. And then, of course, IP securitization is coming up. I think that recently, Mr. Easy talked about, selling shares for his song. I think he talked about that in 2020. So those are developing areas. IP securitization is another aspect. People are now looking at, using IP, their intellectual property, as collateral for loans, just like we use other things for collateral for bank loans. So it's a very interesting area of law. You can look at it, and you can build a practice in all these things. I'd like to say that the real idea is that your job is to help your clients to make money and to control how others make money off their own intellectual property. So that's it's very important. So those are things that you can look at. And how do you start? If you're just starting out, I think that there are things that have worked for people, that has worked for me, and which would work for you if you'd like to, if you're just starting out. And the first thing is that you need to read wide about IP. Read wide. The second thing is that you need to take courses on IP. I know that the IP Institute, they have courses, they have internship opportunities. So you could take advantage of these things. You could go online. There are free courses, paid for courses by WIPO and other institutions. You can look at them, and then you begin to niche. You choose the areas that interest you the most. And then you begin to talk about them, because everything is online these days. You talk about the things that you've studied, the things that you've niched into, the things that you've understood, and you see that clients begin to draw to you, opportunities begin to draw to you in this area. And that's how you begin to build your practice. I think I'm going to round off now by saying that the IP field for a lawyer, a young lawyer, is a very promising field. Creatives are all around us. They are our friends, they are our foes, they are our classmates, they are everywhere around us. So we just need to identify them and, help them, present to them how we can help them, to protect their IP, while profiting from them as well. Help them keep profiting from their IP while also putting money in our own pockets too. So if anybody would, go on to read about these things, go on to take courses, go on to talk about these things, develop themselves in these things, and, put themselves forward. The IP field is a vast ocean, and it can take everyone who is willing to build a practice in it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll hand over to the host now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mojola Oluwa. I think I got that correct now.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. That was explosive and I must say well simplified. Like she has said, IP law is vast and we should all grab our chunk of meat. And remember, it is not in isolation. So we must understand other aspects of law as well.